Welcome to Rad Futures again, Alan Collinge, Rad Futures, aka Student Loan Justice YouTube channel. Um, we are at that point, I think. It's fine. It's okay. I am totally happy giving you my platform. Today we are going to be discussing the darker side. You are the author. I'm so
Yes,
sorry.
quick plug. I never have that laying around when we do
I
our shows,
know.
but
I
I made it
try
a
to
point this time,
insert
so
it. I
I
insert it.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
still the best, most accurate, most valid book out there on the student loan crisis, in my humble opinion. But
Can you hold it up
anyways,
again? Can you hold it up
sure.
again? Okay, so Alan Collinge, who I speak with very frequently, is the author of this book, The Student Loan Scam, The Most Oppressive Debt in U.S. History and How We Can Fight Back. You published this back in the early 2000s, yeah?
I published this in 2009, but
Nine.
I wrote it right as the financial crisis was way was arising and capturing this country. It's amazing. So long ago, I wrote that book, but it truly is more appropriate and more timely today than it was when I wrote it. I don't want to go on too long, but when I wrote it, we owed around 500, $600 billion in student loans. That's tripled now. We owe close to 2 trillion today. So,
Right. Yeah.
and the guts of the problem remain completely intact. So,
Yeah.
um, get the book, or I should do another. I should probably do another version because so much has changed.
Yeah, you should yeah. I always link to it under the video, by the way. So if you're interested in the book, you can find the Amazon link, or if you prefer me to share a different link, Alan, feel free to send that to
I'm
me.
not even worried about it. Just Google it and you can find it.
Okay.
I think you can find it free, actually, believe it or not, on
Okay.
some hack sites and stuff like that. So,
Okay. You published this book, and then when you were done publishing the book, you were kind of you've been on all kinds of media, right? So CNN has asked you to come on and be kind of a talking head around this issue. You're an expert on this issue. Um, Other news channels, Fox, New York Times, right? I mean, we had an episode where I listed all the different things that
60
you
Minutes and News Nation, and the list is long. You people can what you would think it would be.
right. Alan's an expert. So, okay, we're going to talk today a little bit about the darker side of student loans. Not that there's any kind of lighter side, really. I think when we talk about student loans, it's something that is pretty much dark through and through. Um, However, there is, I don't even know what to call it, I guess, a more depressing, um, what's another word? I don't know.
Despondency,
Despondent. There's a
despair, despondency.
despair. There's a despair that is part of this social phenomenon, I guess, for lack of a better word. I think at this point, because the debt is so high, it's in the trillions. Um, and we have so many millions of citizens, US citizens, millions of people, 45 plus million people. I've said before, as we've talked about, this number is thrown out there. I guess we get this from the Department of Education's website, I believe, I think, yes. Whose data, by the way, we don't know if we can really truly rely on because it seems to be problematic at times.
It's,
However,
it's it's the best data out there, and even it is somewhat problematic.
yeah. But that being said, so we have 45 million people who are student loan borrowers. That number is a lot bigger when you consider, and I'm saying this for the people who've never seen any of our videos before, that number explodes when you start tacking on the spouse, the elderly parents that one needs to care for, the inflation that has completely gripped our entire economy, right? Everybody's bills have gone up. The 2.5 children or more that each student loan borrower has, right? We have this extension of the borrower, which actually are these other sort of people who are real human beings and citizens themselves and are being affected negatively by this debt. So it's not debt that affects just the borrower, right? This affects it has ripple effects out into the wider community, the wider economic zone of the country, and the local kind of economies that we have in our cities and our townships. So back to this sort of depressing aspect of student loans that not a lot of people know about actually. Um, let's talk about this. I'm gonna, and I apologize for kind of taking up this time here talking, but you mentioned that you wrote this book kind of inspired by and in the maybe psychological kind of social context and environment of the crash that happened in 2007, 2008, and all of the after effects that happened, with the. So, do you want to remind people? I mean, there's a lot of like younger people who weren't,
Right. I keep forgetting that.
yeah.
Older people now vastly outnumber younger people with student loans. Just so the audience knows, that's a little known fact, but it's true. Uh, so yeah, what inspired me to actually start student loan justice in the first place as a viable organization, grassroots, really was a letter that I got from a woman in Portland, Oregon. Her name was Gail Guidoni, and her son. Uh, her son was a great guy, member of Mensa. He was happily married. He was actually living abroad, which is maybe unrelated. But the point of this guy's story was that his student loans had become so onerous that he ultimately decided to take his own life. I mean, he had everything going for him. He was, I think, 38 years old. Uh, and maybe I won't screen share that one. It's not graphically very pleasing, but the point was that people are literally taking their own lives. They're driven to a point of despair over these loans.
Mhm.
Make no mistake, to the point where they just feel that life isn't worth living. And maybe I should say up front, everybody out there, if you're feeling despondent, it's not just you. Right
Yeah.
now, of the 43 million federal student loan borrowers, remember there's another, as you said, there are other people involved, but there's also private student loans and co-signers, and there's a lot of people that are directly affected. Around 85% of all of those people are hopelessly underwater on their loans.
Yeah.
So that's a huge number of people. It's up dramatically. Even defaults, even from a year ago, are up like 60 or 70%, which is just massive. And so I would just urge everybody. I know this is not a funny or a fun topic, but remember, these are just student loans. These are loans that barely even existed 30 or 40 years ago. And so I think it's probably good for everybody's mental health not to take them too seriously. Quite frankly, if you can, and I know it's hard to find humor in the topic, but these are student freaking loans. These are not nuclear launch codes. This shouldn't be life or death. This is just, in my humble opinion, an unconstitutional, cheesy rat trap that some very selfish people in Washington, D.C., and the colleges and the lenders, Department of Education, and a pit viper's nest of bad guys in Washington, D.C. It's a con. It's a con that they very carefully devised and very cleverly employed. And we don't have to put up with this nonsense. And so, to everybody out there, before we go any further, who is feeling despondent and in despair, I would just say, we need you above ground. We need you living and fighting with us.
Yeah.
This problem is pretty easily solved, but it's going to take a lot of decent people being honest and fight more than anything, fighting on our behalf. And
Yeah.
so,
Thank
I
you.
hope that helps someone out there who may be ruminating some dark things.
Well, yeah, I do too. And, I don't want to sound cheesy because I feel like when people say this, it's like, it's so, I don't know. It's just like, it's void of like real care. But if you are thinking about unaliving yourself, there are resources that you can turn to. I know that this is something that not a lot of people, when you're at that point, this is a serious mental health crisis, right? So I'm glad you said that. Thank you. I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind that you are not alone. There are millions of people, and that does not necessarily always help the people who are feeling this way, right? Because when you're underwater and you're feeling underwater, it's very difficult to see outside of that bubble, right? Um,
It definitely is. And so here's one recent example. Uh, so this is a family in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. This is the Nelson family. Uh, they, I don't know how much they originally borrowed, but their student loan debts totaled around 94.5%. It was the lion's share of all of their debts. Well, and I know I say this every episode, but bankruptcy protections have been stripped from student loans. Few people, not many people realize that.
yeah,
And this family attempted to discharge their student loans in bankruptcy and found out the very hard way that student loans are uniquely non-dischargeable. I suspect they were probably misled by a bankruptcy attorney that just wanted to make money off them through the filing fees and his billable hours.
yeah.
So they filed for bankruptcy. They got all of the shame of having a bankruptcy on their record, and they got none of the relief that they had been hoping for. So this
Right.
is a mother, father of six kids. I'm guessing they were probably in their mid 30s or so, maybe mid to late 30s or something. Uh, and I don't want to gore people with any details because it's just too gruesome. But I'll just say that they decided to do the worst thing possible, and it's 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 just shocking. It's just shocking and sad.
The non-dischargeability in bankruptcy is a huge, huge, huge deal.
You know, I think had bankruptcy been returned to student loans 15 years ago or 10 years ago, none of the tragedies that we're talking about tonight would have happened. Uh, so pointless that our federal government and the colleges and the lenders decided to do this to us. There is blood on their hands, as far
Yeah.
as I'm concerned, and there's, I mean, this heartbreaking example is just one of many. And we've documented dozens of terrible outcomes like this over the years. But you know, what we see on the internet and what gets reported by the media is just a tiny tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can only imagine how many people out there that we don't know about are dealing with this and
Well, I
all
was
too
gonna
often.
say, yeah. I mean, I guess as someone who studied criminology at the graduate level for a while, one of the things that people like myself and other researchers in this line kind of think about are crime statistics, right? You think about not even just crime necessarily statistics, but the numbers and the sort of data that are collated by police. Police keep a lot of different types of data. And when they go to investigate something like a murder suicide, for example, they're going to be keeping information about that. So you can access some of those records. Some of those records are public access. But my point for bringing that up is that there are probably numerous instances of unalivings that have happened that never make it to the news, right? And never make it to the public sort of eye in any way, as far as them being remotely related in any way to persons suffering from the despair of being in student loan debt and unable to dig themselves out, right? So the conditions around the debt create this heaviness for lack of a better word, right? Especially when you're so underwater that now, let's say, the government has begun
Garnishing wages, garnishing
garnishing.
tax returns, taking Social Security income.
They take Social Security income from retired people, by the way, right? So there are so many levels to the horror that people have to live through because of this debt. And it doesn't ever get talked about. So I'm sorry, I see that you shared something. Can you tell us what this is?
Yeah, this is the original. This is the story that really was the deciding factor when I was way back in the day in 2006 when I was considering whether to chuck everything and start doing student loan justice full time. So this is the story from Gail Guidoni, and I'll just leave it up on screen and leave it to other people to read it. It's really heart wrenching, and but I would urge everybody to read it. I think every one of us can find a little bit of ourselves in that story. And here's another one from around that same time period. This was so we went on 60 Minutes top story back in May 2006, and I got this story in after that. This was a woman. She was a breast cancer survivor. She had gone through at a young age had gone through some pretty significant cancer surgeries and chemotherapy and so forth. She was a survivor. She was in remission and her prognosis was good, but her brother told me that it was really just the constant hounding, the calls, the collection goon squads and what they do to pressure people to get money out of them.
Yeah.
It was that stress that really pushed her over the edge. And again, I don't want to be a broken record here, but guys, let me just tell you, I'm a long time defaulted borrower, 25 years now or more actually. I have found humor in this. I put my negative energy into fighting this battle, and it's a very easy fight to win when a lot of people are doing it. But that is by far and away the more and most constructive, cathartic way to deal with all these dark feelings that
But
people have out there.
when you say you found humor in this, you're not specifically talking about this woman's story. You're
No,
talking
of course
about,
not. Of course
right.
not. I
Yeah.
just psychologically the weight of this debt, which hangs on me as heavier than most people.
Right.
Um, I try not to let it eat me. I try not to let it, hollow me out, but rather view this as what it is, an unconstitutional loan scam that nobody in this country should have to put up with.
Mhm.
It's not us, guys. It's them. The founding fathers called for uniform bankruptcy rights in the Constitution. Every other debt in this country has those rights. Every other debt in this country, to the best of my knowledge, has statutes of limitations, truth in lending laws, fair debt collection laws. All of those things have been stripped for very selfish reasons from very, I would say, evil, but certainly very greedy and selfish people in Washington, D.C., who would very happily conquer and enslave this country in debt, which is exactly what the founding fathers wanted to avoid when they called for uniform bankruptcy rights in the Constitution.
Yeah. Can you go back to that last slide? You kind of stayed on it briefly.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
wait. Hold on.
it was like the front cover of a news story.
I think it
No,
would have been probably this one.
that one.
Yes.
Couple caught. Oh, yeah.
This one was just another one of those just very difficult stories. It was a man and his wife. He was a chiropractor. He was kind of a 9/11 sort of hero volunteer person.
Oh,
His wife, and they had two children. As far as I can tell, just a very good Catholic family. And they had been sued by the Department of Education for their federal student loans. They had a federal judgment
oh my
uh,
God.
around their necks, and ultimately, they decided that, well, they made the worst decision one can make with one's life. And again, I'm kind of at a loss for words at this point. I can only say that these are the tragedies that we really want to avoid for sure. Like there's no good reason in this country to be dealing with stories like these. I'll get back to that one in a minute. But it's and the reason that and I'm so glad you're doing this podcast, Jessica, and the reason it's so timely is because right now we're in the darkest, most dismal, most dystopian uh, era in the history of the student loan program. I don't think more has been stacked against the borrowers than is stacked against us right now here today. You know, the Democrats came in, said they were going to return bankruptcy rights, said they were going to cancel loans. They never did it. The Republicans are just vicious and evil, and they did everything to make these loans even more onerous and vicious than one can imagine since Trump has been in office. I know everybody, almost very many people, I think most borrowers maybe even, are being pressured right now, not only by the servicers, but by collection companies and many others, up to and including the Department of Education, as they try to force people to choose between picking the repayment assistance plan or another repayment plan, which, in my humble opinion, is a false choice. It's a loser's dilemma. But right now, the anguish and the angst out there is at the highest level in this country, certainly in the 21 years that I've been doing this. And
Yeah,
so,
it's
um,
really, it's really, uh, we talked about, I think I talked about this with Ryan Liebenthal. We were discussing her book is called Burdened, right, about student loan debt. And we discussed the burden of researching this topic and being an activist kind of in this topic. There is a certain burnout that one can feel, because it's such a dark, depressing kind of thing to focus on every day. Um, how people are hurting. But like you said, you find the humor in it. I try to. I get angry. I get pretty angry, and it fires me up to just keep plugging away and trying to raise awareness around it. So I don't know.
yeah, I know it's so easy to get burned out. Nobody even wants to think about their student loans, much less be worried by all the stress that comes along with having defaulted on your student loans, which right now there's probably 7, 8, 9 million people, which is 25% of all borrowers are in default. But probably around half of all borrowers will be in default, like very shortly, like maybe even by the end of this year. Um, so it's very easy to be burned out by it. I burned out on this topic, quite frankly, in probably 2009 or 10 or so after 4 or 5 years of doing this.
Yeah.
Um, but I would just tell everybody, life's not pretty. Life is a tough gig for many, probably most people, and that's always been true. And so is it also true with the student loan thing. I don't think that we're going to see any positive developments on this unless and until people start fighting and not allowing themselves to be intimidated and cowed and discouraged and lectured to by their drunk uncle and so on and so forth. John Adams said there's two ways to conquer and enslave a country. One is by the sword, the other is by debt,
Yeah.
because debt is a very personal matter, and nobody wants to talk publicly about their student loan problems. Least
Well,
of all me. Like I almost never discuss my own personal situation.
oh, sure. Yeah. 100. I
Um,
totally understand. 100%. I mean, same, it's not
yeah,
something, and also it's uncouth, right? I mean, it's like socially, uncouth
yeah.
to do so. So,
Nobody wants to go and protest in front of the Washington Monument and shake their fists and say, return bankruptcy to student loans. Like
right.
it's just not a thing.
But
Or even
but
cancel student loans. Nobody really wants to do that.
But
And
considering the economic situation right now, considering the state of the job markets, considering the state of inflation, considering the amount in interest that everybody owes on everything right now, if you've borrowed anything, right? I mean, everything's gone up. Food has increased significantly. Gas prices are skyrocketing, right? It feels, I think this is everybody's feeling this. Everybody's feeling like things are getting harder, right? I mean, this is, if you're someone who has the privilege and the luxury of having a job where you can even afford to have a car, right? You're still feeling the pinch, but you're in a better position than a vast majority of people. There are so many people losing their apartments right now, losing their homes. There are people who, because of this debt, which, by the way, let's contextualize this. This is like compounded.
it's yeah, it's not happening in a
It's
vacuum.
not
This
happening in a
is
vacuum. Thank you. Yes.
there are 43 million federal student loan borrowers. 85% of those people, that's 37 million people of all student loan borrowers, they are losing sleep over their loans. Like something like 75%, which is 3 out of 4, have stopped paying. So that's more than all the standing armies on earth combined times two. That's like as big as the state of California. If we were a state, we'd be California. That's that's a huge number of people. And so if sympathy loves misery, or misery loves sympathy,
Misery loves company.
at least we have that going for us, right? Like you are
Well,
definitely so not alone on this.
so
Or
so
yeah,
people are despondent, right? And contextualizing this in the current market, in the current environment, in the current jobs, jobs market, current whatever, everything, right? Food, water, resources, utilities, rent, mortgage, whatever. Um, Everyone's feeling the pinch. My point for saying that is that, like you said, it's not happening in a vacuum. So when we think about it, it's like, oh, well, this person has, let's say, just, let's pull something out of our hat here. What's let's say an average number of student loan debt that someone might owe on a payment per month? 3,000.
well, like the family in Oklahoma had, I think, 125 or $35,000. It varies. It goes across. The average student loan debt today is about $40,000. Um,
Supposedly, according to
yeah,
the
supposedly, exactly. We don't know how much is actually baked into that number and how much they aren't reporting, but
I don't think that's true, and I'm going to say it again for the
I
people
think
that
most people on our group have right around about $100,000, and sometimes far, far, far more.
it's into the six figures. And here's why. I'm going to say it again. I say this almost in every video, but I'm going to say it again because there's a lot of people that watch these who've never seen any of the other videos. The reason why the 40,000 average figure does not add up, and I don't care that it comes from the Department of Education, the reason that that figure does not add up is because if you look at the tuition prices at literally any university,
It's
particularly
like 40,000 per year.
per year. Okay.
Yeah,
People are not paying for a year and leaving. They're going and they're getting a 4-year degree. Sometimes they're there and they go on to graduate school, right?
right.
They get more student loans. People are in triple digits, not triple, but like six-figure debt, right? Um,
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you do graduate school. It's a joke when I see the 40,000 figure. I honestly, I just don't believe it. I don't. I think it's fake. I think
You
it's
know,
fake.
I wish I could find some good reliable data that that we could point to that One thing that I think is going on, this is pretty interesting. Like me, for example, I originally borrowed around $35,000 for college. My loans were like many people's loans; they were thrown into default despite my best efforts to keep them in good stead. So I realized a long time ago, whoa, something is not right with this lending program, and I haven't had an opportunity to make payments since then, and I won't pay
Yeah.
until we get our bankruptcy leverage back. But, anyways, that's my baggage. Doesn't matter. The point is, on my record with the Department of Education, with interest and penalties and fees and all that stuff, I would imagine that I probably owe somewhere, and I haven't checked in years because I just don't care anymore. I probably owe somewhere around 450, maybe even $500,000 on those loans.
Mhm.
And so the amount that people are being billed versus the amount that shows up for whatever reason in the federal data, there appears to be a very large disparity in those numbers. I think there may be a lot of people who maybe went to community college for a couple semesters and left, and there may be a couple of, quite a few nickel and dime loans laying out there that bring the average down. But as far as the people on our group are concerned, I would say even a little bit north of $100,000 is what most of their balances are today.
Alan, literally everyone I've ever met in my waking life and everyone I've ever interviewed on this channel about it is in six-figure debt.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That's why it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Everyone I meet, everyone I've ever met is in six figures of debt. I mean,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. I have met some people who are like, they're owing like 40, 50, 60, 70,000, some 80,000, some close to 100, but they're still under that six figure. I've met mostly people who are over that 100,000 mark, well
Yeah.
over that, especially if they've gone to grad school. There's no way that you can't be because of the
That's right.
price, because of the price of tuition. There's no way that
It's
you
just
can't.
math. It's just math.
Yeah,
And
it's the
and
math. The math doesn't math.
math does not math at all.
So
So yeah, there was another story. Maybe this will be the last. I don't want to overwhelm people with sadness, but there's two more. But this is the last example that I really want to share tonight about self harm. And so let me just share my screen here. This is a younger guy. This was quite recently, a couple of years ago. This is in Texas at a flight school. Now, I don't know about you, Jessica, but when I fly, I would like to know that my pilots are of sound mind and body.
mhm.
And here we have this is I don't know much about the flight school industry, but the flight schools that I've heard about, including this one, especially this one, go out of their way to drown their students in debt.
Mm.
I could go on for a while about that, but I'll just say that here's a recent example of a younger guy, and his fellow students surmised that it was really the school and the financial pressure that they're putting on their students that caused this particular catastrophe. He took his plane out unauthorized and crashed it into the ground. And so, and as you were saying earlier, the student loan thing does not just affect the people that it affects directly.
Right.
It affects many others. And here's one example potentially of where the
For your
stress that
people. Yeah.
these loans cause could have catastrophic implications that go far, far beyond just the person who has the student loans themselves.
Yeah, and let's think about the professions that are filled with people who went to school using student loans. It's literally every profession, right? There is no profession out there.
Do you want your surgeon drowning in student loan debt during your operation? No, of course
Right,
not.
right.
Uh, we can go on and on, but the point remains that this just can't continue. And as I said, we are on the cusp of something the likes of which we've never seen before.
Hmm.
We've never had a point where 30, 40, 50, 60% of the borrowers were in default, all being hounded by the collection companies, running and hiding and living in fear of the creditors and being, I would say, coerced. I would say illegally coerced by the Department of Education into signing on to new loan documents.
Yeah.
This whole thing is just a tinderbox. And to those out there who don't have student loans, and particularly to those out there who maybe have had a hand in perpetuating this student loan scam, I would say that you should also be worried, because not only are people losing their minds and hurting themselves, in the case of a guy called Justin Moan in Pennsylvania, they are starting to harm others.
What
And so,
happened in this case?
yeah, this is quite a famous case. For a couple of reasons. Well, number one, so Justin Moan in Pennsylvania was drowning student loan debt. He sued the Department of Education over his student loans,
Okay.
and his lawsuit was obviously unsuccessful. And again, I'll share my screen here. But he sued the Department of Education. Predictably, his lawsuit was not successful, and this guy absolutely snapped. And this was no shrinking liberal or bleeding liberal or whatever you want to say. This was a pretty hardcore conservative guy. Um, he wound up ultimately literally declaring war on the Department of Education.
Hmm.
He declared war on, in fact, he declared war on the entire federal government. And ultimately, he wound up murdering his own father, who was a federal pensioner.
Hmm.
And again, I would urge people, if they're interested, they can Google this and they can see all the gruesome details. I really don't even want to repeat them here. But it was just absolutely grotesque what this guy did.
Yeah.
And that should give everybody pause. When we are running a loan scam, and it is a scam on this country that is causing people not only to hurt themselves, but to commit very heinous murders, we should be very concerned. And to the people out there who are making money on the scam, who work to perpetuate it, you should be very concerned about cases like that of Mr. Justin Moan.
Yeah.
Stuff like Luigi Mangione, that did not happen in a vacuum. And I would put this case
Mhm.
in some sort of a similar context to what we saw with Luigi.
And let's, for those younger maybe people or people who've never found this channel before, who's watching, they're watching it for the first time. You and I have talked about this many, many times. Let's remind everybody that one of the main aspects that we are battling in this fight, right? It is a fight. It's a war. It's a class war. We've
It's
talked about that.
absolutely part of the class war. Yep.
One of the main aspects, one of the main weapons in the sort of cabinet of artillery for the government and the servicers and all of the people, the lowlifes who are profiting off of this pain, is the control of very, very cleverly crafted propaganda, right? So there's a narrative that is being driven and it's being pushed very hard all over social media, right? So the idea of the bad borrower, the idea that if you have student loan debt, it's you that is the failure, not the system that set it up, not the servicers who are hounding everybody, not the federal government. Let's talk about the negative amortization, not the systemic issues, right? Um, it's what is it? There's a word for it. This is actually like an abuse tactic, right? If this was a
Yeah,
domestic
it's the
violence,
classic blame the victim.
it's
It's
the victim blaming and, deny abuse, reverse victim and offender. That is what the propaganda is trying to do. And
yeah,
we are fighting back. You have to push back on it. It's not real. A lot of that stuff on X is coming from bots, and the bots have
yes,
been programmed to say very specific things. And it's always to paint the picture that the borrower is in the wrong. It's about the bad borrower. Let's talk
yeah.
about that for a brief moment because I know that you're very well familiar with that. Um,
Yeah, I live and breathe through the bots on X.
right.
And maybe they're very underpaid people in the Philippines or something like that. So maybe they are human, but who knows? It doesn't matter. The point is that you're exactly right, Jessica. There are a couple of narratives that our sociopathic opposition, uses
Mm,
against us.
yeah.
One is what you said, blaming the borrowers. This is not a bad borrower problem. This is a bad loan scam problem.
Yeah.
This is a catastrophically failed loan scam. Three-quarters of everybody is no longer paying, guys. This is not about us being um, irresponsible or, the people today are as irresponsible or as responsible pretty much as they've ever been. Uh, the people haven't changed much. Quite frankly, I think people today are probably a little more responsible than people were back in the 70s and 60s and 50s. This is not about, we haven't changed. What has changed is this lending scam. You take away bankruptcy rights, you take away statutes of limitations, and you're given a license to steal. And that is exactly what all the lowlifes, and I include in that the colleges, by the way, Department of Education, the lending industry, the money changers, if you want to say that.
Yeah.
Um, this is something that they did to us. It's not anything that we did. I like to say, now that the federal student loan program is just in catastrophic failure by all rational metrics, we, the borrowers, did not break this lending system. This lending system tried to break us,
Right.
and I'd say they had some success. But this is one of the most painful narratives. Blame the borrower. We see these bots, these fake personas, all over saying, "Hey, when I was a kid, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, pay back what you owed." And we don't have time tonight to go through why all those lines that I just mentioned are complete bullshit. People
Yeah.
have paid. People have paid through the nose. But that is the psyops that's being run on us. And there's another, maybe a higher level psyop running on the political realm, and that is that our opposition is trying as hard as possible to paint student loan borrowers as being young liberals,
Mhm.
these sort of entitled, feminazi, blue-haired, nose ring people. Um,
Underwater basket weaving degrees,
Everyone, gender studies degrees,
gender studies. Yeah.
grievance studies. They're trying to paint us all as liberal, and
Hmm.
I have nothing against people who are liberal and fall into those categories. That's fine. But the point is, that is not the reality with student loan borrowers today.
Right.
Older people, there are far more people over the age of 50 with student loans than under the age of 25, like by millions of people. And
Yeah.
they owe far, far more,
Yeah.
despite having borrowed far, far less.
Yep.
And if you look at the states that are worst hurt by student loans, it's not Massachusetts, it's not Oregon or California or Washington State or Vermont. No, no, no. It is the red states. It's Mississippi and Louisiana and Alabama and Florida and Missouri and these places. These are
Yeah.
not liberal states, and these are not liberal people that hold this debt.
Right.
My best estimate, Jessica, is that something around 70% of all student loan borrowers are not Democrats. So they're either independent or they're Republican.
Yeah.
And so I would just tell people, all the negative comments that pass into your mind because of this avalanche of propaganda that our opposition pays for, don't let it get to you. We're a fiercely nonpartisan group. We can't stand either party. Republicans are vicious and evil. The Democrats are evil.
Excuse me.
But when Donald Trump started talking about fake news a few years ago, when he came around, he's not wrong. And on the student loan issue, I can say with absolute utter certainty that the mainstream media and much of the alternative media is bought and paid for. It is controlled by our opposition
Yeah.
who want to completely gaslight the public uh, and intimidate student loan borrowers so that they can somehow hide this $2 trillion gorilla or elephant under the rug.
Hmm.
Um, they just can't. It's too late for that. And the good news, maybe a hopeful point that I would maybe leave people with, is that the dam is breaking. People are finally starting to understand all the fake nonsense AI bullshit, pardon my French,
Hmm.
out there on the internet,
Yeah.
from very dark, well-resourced forces that would like to perpetuate things exactly like the student loan scam onto the country. And maybe, I would urge everybody out there who's watching, who may be on the other side of the fence, who may be making money perpetuating this loan scam, you should stop. The lending system is failed. The student loans are finished. 75% of everybody is not paying today. I would estimate that something like 80 or 85% of everybody will not be paying a year from now. And there is
And
not one thing, nothing that anybody in Washington, D.C. can do about it. Lending
and
systems, sorry, go ahead.
no, it's fine. They should also stop, right? Not just because I don't know. I agree with you, but they should also stop because it's a moral issue. I don't
I
care.
try not. I've almost given up making moral arguments
Sure,
with amoral people, but
sure,
of
sure.
course, you are
Yeah,
right.
right.
Those people need to rethink their lives.
Yeah,
Life is more important than money, and what you do for money defines you in a very serious and strong way, in my
very
opinion.
much so. And,
And
that's a whole nother conversation for another episode, I think. But, we have a universal morality. There is such a thing. If you look at all the ancient scriptures from all the different belief systems all over the world, they all tend to agree that there is such a thing called good and there's such a thing called evil, and they're at odds, right? They're at opposition with each other. You know what the right thing to do is. If you don't do it, that's on you. There is karma. I do believe that. Whether you want to call it karma or you want to call it some kind of divine retribution or justice or judgment day or whatever,
whether
I
you
don't
are
know.
Christian or Muslim or Jewish or Hindu or any other religion that you would want to point to, every single one of them has very strong things to say about usury,
Yeah,
about the evil influence of money in general.
yeah.
And so,
And
rethink your
about
lives, ladies and gentlemen. If you're out there trying to figure out how you can continue to perpetuate this loan scam, it ain't going to happen. And I don't think you want to be hugging this tar ball all the way down to oblivion.
no, and I do believe that there will be some divine justice around this issue because it can't continue and energy is real. Energy is very real and they need to be very careful. One thing I want to say is you have said many, many times 75% of people, of student loan borrowers, are not paying. Now, why are they not paying? It's not that they're actually refusing because they're angry at the system. They're not paying because they literally can't, right? There are conditions in their life that are preventing them from being able to pay. So, like, what
It's
would,
not a won't pay proposition. It's a can't pay. And
right,
a lot of these people have paid. I
right.
can introduce you to any thousands of people on our group who have already repaid far, far more than
Yeah,
they originally borrowed. Yet they still owe far, far more than they originally borrowed. Uh, we're not a monolith or anything like that, but yeah, I would say 95% of the people in our group, either they have paid and they can pay no more, or they can't pay. It's just not going to happen,
yeah,
and it's going to get worse going forward. And frankly, in my humble opinion, nobody should be paying their money into this beast. So we never tell people to default on their loans on purpose, because the way the laws are arranged, that only gives the government and the terrible people more power to harass us.
right.
But in my humble opinion, anything that everyone can do to find a way to not pay is definitely worth doing, because
Mhm.
we can't be feeding this beast our hard-earned money. That interest was created out of thin air. There's absolutely no good reason that tens of millions of people should be, walking circles around a stone mill to try and repay that fake interest that was conjured out of nothing.
That's called indentured servitude.
Well, that's exactly what it is, and that was outlawed along with slavery in Article 13 in this country. I should also say the founders called for uniform bankruptcy laws, uniform bankruptcy rights in the Constitution. So the founding fathers are on our side, ladies and gentlemen. In my opinion, there's no good reason to be harming yourself, harming your significant others in whatever way, second order ways that happens. There's no good reason to do anything but help us fight.
Yeah.
Just in our group alone, we've got something like 1.4 million people. 1.3999 million of those people are in some form of despair, despondency, or stress, or otherwise, and are not helping us fight. I have to be honest. And I
Yeah.
get that. I get that nobody wants to even think about their student loans, much less fight for student loan justice. But it's got to happen, because all these other fake groups, all these operatives, all this money that our opposition throws at the problem, all the captured media, they may have no argument and they may know that they're wrong, but they can make this loan scam go on for a long time.
The captured media really irritates the fucking shit out of me,
Yeah,
honestly.
I
I
couldn't agree with you
can't
more.
stand seeing those bullshit articles, like the one that you posted the other day.
I
Um,
can't remember what it was, but it was probably Forbes magazine saying, "Oh, we have a deadline of July 1st. You have to pick a plan. You have to pick either the new repayment assistance plan or the other." It's disgusting.
it
There
is.
are almost no good journalists out here anymore. 20 years ago, when I started this, there was good reporters. There was, 60 Minutes. I went on a top story on 60 Minutes in a very seminal piece that led to political action. It led to Ted Kennedy's final piece of student loan legislation.
You want to write
Um,
about something? I'll give you an idea to write about something. Here you go. What's the extent of this is a good piece of investigative journalism, so hopefully this makes it to somebody's desk. What is the extent of intentionality behind the regulatory failure of the United States Department of Education? What is the extent of intentionality behind that failure? Now, if there is intentionality, it's not necessarily a failure, right? It's
it's not a
something else.
feature. It's not a bug. It's a feature. That's
It's a
right.
feature of the organization, right? So then let's think about we know that the removal of bankruptcy rights from student loan borrowers was in fact an intentional decision. That was very intentional. It was done, it was mandated. Boom, it's law. No more bankruptcy rights, right? That was the intention, and they got it done. That was intentional. Now, what extent of intentionality is behind the regulatory failure of the U.S. Department of Education, and to what extent is the refusal to return bankruptcy rights to the American people who are student loan borrowers intentional?
Well, I can tell you on that second part, we had a great bill in 2022. It was bipartisan, had all the votes needed to pass. It would have returned bankruptcy to student loans with a minor clawback from the colleges. Probably never would have been enforced. But, the Democrats, for example, had been promising to return bankruptcy protections to student loans for decades. So now finally they had the trifecta of power, not counting Obama's trifecta back in 2008. They had all the power they needed. They had all the power needed to pass the bill. They had a great piece of legislation. And at the very 11th hour, Elizabeth Warren, of
I
all
know,
people, stood up and sabotaged this bill.
I know.
And the colleges lobbied against this bill at the very 11th hour. And
Somebody
lo and
stepped
behold,
in. It's somebody stepped in. I'm sure. I'm sure of
there
it.
was
I'm
intention there.
positive.
And it was certainly the colleges that I can prove. It was certainly Senator Elizabeth Warren, who appeared on that 60 Minutes episode that I discussed earlier in 2006. Big shame on her. She was there's some very hard feelings there, and I don't know that
Yeah,
I'll
there should
totally.
be. She fucked over millions of people.
She absolutely did, and whether that was for her own political purposes or what, we'll never know. But I would just urge everybody out there: don't count on the Democrats to be our savior. They are not our savior, and they proved their fealty to the colleges over us in 2022 after decades of promising that they were going to return bankruptcy rights.
Not only
Um,
that, but everybody's like, oh, well, Joe Biden was going to do it and he was talking about it, and blah, blah, blah. Joe Biden was instrumental in removing bankruptcy rights.
That's right. And Nancy Pelosi was instrumental in killing that student loan cancellation gimmick that Biden tried in 2022 or 3.
Yeah.
It was Nancy Pelosi who publicly said, no, the president can't cancel loans by executive order. That was a thing that my group, Student Loan Justice, caused to be even a thing in the first place. And so I followed that very carefully on both sides of the aisle. And I can tell you that Nancy Pelosi was the enabler. She gave the Supreme Court the political permission structure to rule against that loan cancellation. So
Yeah.
there are no good guys out there. The Republicans are evil, obviously. I don't even think I have to say that because everybody knows it and they can read about it in the paper. But the Democrats are, and many people would say, almost worse. Like
Oh, they're
almost,
snakes.
it's
They're snakes.
yes.
They toe the line, and they dangle the carrot of, we're gonna push to get student loan forgiveness, or whatever it is, right? Like we said last time, just to carry them long enough through to make it through the fucking midterms,
And
and
then
then they drop the fucking bag.
at the very last minute, they go, oh, and they pull the rug out and they go, oh, no, yeah, well, sorry.
People are
And
sick of the shit, man. They are sick and tired of the fucking shit.
And I'm a lifelong Democrat. I am not today now a Democrat, but I was born and raised as a Democrat. And
Yeah.
I don't know what you're back, but so and to all the Democrats out there, you should be listening to us very carefully because Donald Trump being evil does not make the Democrats good. You can't sit back on your ass, betray 37 distressed student loan borrowers, and expect to win any elections. We vote, and 37 million people, probably 50 million people if you include private student loans and the cosigners. That's a lot of people. That's almost enough to elect a president outright. And just look at Joe Biden's agenda. In 2020, Biden was promising to return bankruptcy. He was promising to cancel student loans. He did neither of those things, but he won that election. Now in 2024, Kamala Harris promised nothing. She just had some vacant agenda that was just ambiguous, and it said, "Oh, she'll do her best to help student loan borrowers."
Yeah.
That is not going to win you any elections. Like, you may think that you can sit back and the midterms are going to fall in your lap, and that's probably true. I don't know, but
You know what, Alan? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
sure.
A lot of this is just, honestly, it's just political theater.
Yeah, and we know it's political theater because
That's all it is.
just on our group, for example, over the past year, very few people would jump onto the group and say, "Hey, but you gotta vote for the Democrats. You gotta vote for the Democrats." Now that we're in a midterm year and the midterms are coming up in a few months, we have 20 people a day jumping on that we using nicknames and false identities, and you can tell the whole point of these people is to say the Republicans are going to ruin your life if you don't vote for the Democrats. If you have student loans, you absolutely must vote for the Democrats. You have no excuse. Come on, guys. This is bullshit. This is political
It
theater.
is, because they don't ever fucking do anything. I'm so tired of hearing Democrats use it as a tool to get
Yeah,
votes. We know what you're doing. We're not fucking stupid. Stop.
exactly. Um, and so, and to everybody out there, as I just want to repeat, we're a fiercely nonpartisan group. We tell the
Right.
truth. And
Yeah.
I could spend another hour or 2 hours talking about how evil and vicious the Republicans are, but it's a good cop, bad cop routine. Like, which is worse? The point of both of those guys is to arrest you and put you in jail. And so, I would urge people to just be smart. Please be smarter than that. This is a very vicious political trap that student loan borrowers find ourselves in. And, you got to be smarter than that. You can't let people blow smoke up your ass, and you can't let people intimidate you into thinking the world's going to end if you don't vote for a Democrat, even though they screwed us on student loans.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, going back to our last video, um, let's ask the very difficult question. We need to start asking the harder questions. I've been saying this on X lately. We need to start asking the harder question around this, which is, to what extent is this whole system of student loan debt, the oppression of it, the predatory nature of it, the negative amortization, the seemingly, debt in perpetuity, right? The indentured servitude nature of it. To what extent is this strategically manufactured by the Epstein class people who sit at the top, right? They're all over Washington, D.C. We know that. We know that. Anyone who's read any snippets of the Epstein files knows very well that that is the case. And that
They're,
is
they're
why a lot of things don't get done because they are beholden to the Epstein people.
exactly right. And, it's not just in Washington, D.C. Like that student loan cancellation I was telling you about that Nancy Pelosi stood up and opposed. The reason she opposed that was because a billionaire real estate mogul named Susan Swig, I believe, SWIG, absolutely is her last name, San Francisco billionaire, whispered in Nancy's ear and said, "No, we can't have student loan cancellation by executive order."
Yeah.
So these people are there's a tiny number of them, but they carry an undue influence in Washington, D.C. And, we're talking about, we have to talk about the elites. We have to talk about Harvard University. And I could go on again for an hour talking about all the dirty tricks that I have seen played by Harvard PhDs
Yeah.
in this space. Columbia, NYU, Stanford, you name it. I can point you to a strata of very well resourced, very entitled, arrogant people who make it their stock and trade to keep this loan scam going.
Yeah.
And, things reduce to absurdity over time if you look at something hard enough. And I have seen so many just blatant conflicts and it shows up mostly in the politicians versus what they say versus what they do in what they say versus what they do. And I would only tell people out there, please just be smarter than that. Realize that this is going on, acknowledging that we are in a class war, transcends both parties, and it's very easily defeated, but it will only be defeated when people stop letting themselves be gaslit. When people stop assuming that everything they read in Forbes magazine is true. On student loans, certainly, but let's be honest, this goes well beyond just student loans. People need to wake up. Both parties, in my humble opinion, are two sides of the same stained coin. It is a uniparty,
Yeah.
and there's no better poster child for the class war than the student loan issue.
Mhm.
And to everybody out there who doesn't have student loans, who is just emotionally inclined to go with their knee-jerk response, which is like, "Hey, you borrowed the money, you got to pay it back." You should either quit caring and quit talking about student loans, or you should learn about student loans, learn the truth about student loans
Yeah.
before you ever talk about student loans again. Because you wagging your finger at the people being wrecked by this nationally threatening loan scam, that's exactly what the colleges, what the Department of Education, what the lenders, what the wealthy elite, that's exactly what they want.
Mhm.
And you don't want to be a useful idiot,
That's what
that's
they want. That plays into the whole class war. They want us
exactly
fighting each other.
If you're worried about the globalists, the first thing you should do is stop wagging your finger at student loan borrowers.
Yeah,
We're all on the same side.
right.
And I think people are finally starting to get that, and all the nonsense, stupid memes that we see against us, and uh, all the all the phrases and all the little language tricks that they play. I think people are finally starting to see through that. But um, don't let the wealthy, elite, arrogant assholes gaslight you, because
Yeah.
um, if they can do to student loans, or I'm sorry, if they can do to other loans what they did to student loans, they will. They will take bankruptcy away from your medical debt. They'll take bankruptcy rights away from your credit cards. They'll take bankruptcy away from every nickel of consumer debt that they can possibly think of.
Yeah.
And that's a place where we don't want to go.
Neither party has stepped up to the plate. Both of them have been snakes and have used this issue as a platform for their own manipulative games and gain. And all of it boils down to the greed of the people who sit at the top of the food chain. I refuse to call them elite. I will no longer do that. I will not use my words that way because they don't deserve it. They're not. They're not elite.
I actually agree with you totally. They're a bunch of
Um,
rich assholes. They're no smarter than us. They're no better than us.
and
They
let's
are not
keep it
more they are not more equal than us.
And let's
We are
keep it real, right? Some of them are beholden. They've been bribed and captured by the Epstein class because they are associates with the Epstein class. Many of these people actually get sexually turned on by torturing little children and adult human beings. So to think that these people are sitting in office wanting to actually help the electorate is stupid. Right?
yeah, I I don't even want to say how disgusting it might get up in at those levels. But
Yeah.
you should have no respect for the people who are making our laws. They haven't earned our respect. They don't deserve our respect. And they know full well what they're doing to this country.
Yep.
And they had better rethink themselves, because we're getting to a point where, as evidenced by that story that I relayed earlier with Justin Moan, the torches and the pitchforks are very real. And you can only perpetuate a scam, a financial scam, for so long before the wheels come off the wagon, and the chickens come home to roost. And I won't say anything more than that, but I would just tell everybody out there that's who thinks they can perpetuate this loan scam any further, you cannot. And
Yep.
the quicker they acknowledge this failed loan scam for what it is, the quicker we can kick it to the curb and move on as a country.
Yeah. Agreed, Alan. I think we covered it.
I
So
think we're good.
just to circle back, we started by highlighting the tragedies. We were talking about some of the main tragedies that have hit the news. Self-harm, unaliving, various different tragic scenarios of people becoming overwhelmed with the burden of this student loan debt, which is predatory and it is oppressive and it is unconstitutional. It's harming US citizens every single day. We don't really know the real figure of other tragic situations that have probably most likely happened as a result of people becoming overwhelmed with this debt. However, we can ask, researchers, investigative journalists, I encourage all of you to start digging into police records, start asking for data, start asking families the questions around why did this person do this? Was there any student loan debt? What was their debt situation? That's something that we should start talking about more. It's something that I think, probably, I wouldn't be surprised if it's intentionally kept out of the media because they're trying to control the whole narrative. So,
Yeah, yes, and I'll save my breath, but yes, you are absolutely correct. The media does everything it can to not report
yeah,
on cases like these.
yeah,
So maybe my last words are just: if you're thinking of harming yourself, just don't do it. We need you fighting with us. You're way more valuable above ground helping us fight
Yeah.
than allowing this loan scam to get to you. And you're definitely not alone. And we got this fight when people actually fight it, and so there's every reason to be hopeful. And I would just urge people to put their negative energy into positive directions, and that'll help everybody involved.
Know that you're not alone,
Absolutely.
right? Um, and I'll list some resources at the bottom of the video if you need any. I'll have some links there for people who are going through it to access.
Yeah.
And you can
It's
absolutely,
cathartic to fight this fight. It feels good to fight this fight. I think it's good for you. I sleep like a baby at night.
it does. And I also want to extend an invitation if anyone's out there watching this who is feeling overwhelmed and burdened with this, you can absolutely do not hesitate to reach out to me personally at my email, radfuturesnow@gmail.com. You can also reach out to Alan. Alan's a very good person to talk to. So yeah,
We're pretty much always around, it seems like.
yeah, I know. Yeah, doing what we can.
That's right.
Hopefully, hopefully more people open their eyes and start waking up to the absolute tragedy of the situation for millions and millions and millions of people in this country. Okay. With that said, we're going to hope for the best. And I encourage everybody to try and, be like Alan, try to see the humor in it somehow, some way, and join us in the fight. We
Yeah.
need you.